What if the most chaotic band in America never gave up? A group that rose from small-town garages to the world's biggest stages, then nearly destroyed themselves in a whirlwind of excess, ego, and addiction. Aerosmith's journey isn't just about music. It's about survival. The fights, the breakdowns, the shocking lows, and the unbelievable comeback that made them legends. This is the story of a band that lived through every extreme, crashed into every wall, and still managed to carve their name in history. This is Aerosmith. It began in the late 1960s. Boston wasn't exactly the epicenter of rock music, but it had garages, basements, and restless kids who wanted more. Steven Tyler, born Stephen Victor Tallarico, was the son of a classically trained pianist. He grew up around music, but he wasn't the type to sit still and practice scales. He wanted chaos, energy, performance. Joe Perry, meanwhile, was the quiet opposite. A guitar obsessive, he spent hours perfecting riffs, drawing influence from blues, British invasion rock, and the rawness of American garage bands. When Tyler and Perry crossed paths in 1969, something clicked. Tyler's flamboyant energy collided with Perry's gritty blues tone, and suddenly, Boston had its own dangerous duo. They brought in Tom Hamilton on bass, Joey Kramer on drums, and Brad Whitford on rhythm guitar. By 1970, Aerosmith was born. Their earliest gigs were rough: clubs, high schools, and small bars, where the crowd was drunk more than supportive. But even in those tiny rooms, there was something undeniable. Tyler's scream cut through the noise. Perry's riffs were jagged, mean, and addictive. Together, they weren't just playing songs. They were commanding attention. The band's self-titled debut album dropped in 1973. It wasn't an instant smash, but it held a hidden gem. Dream On, a song that would become an anthem, though nobody realized it at first. But Aerosmith wasn't interested in waiting. They were hungry. And soon, the ride was about to accelerate. By the mid-1970s, Aerosmith had gone from Boston hopefuls to national rock contenders. Their second album, Get Your Wings, 1974, started turning heads. Songs like Same Old Song and Dance and Seasons of Wither showed they weren't one-hit hopefuls. But the real explosion came in 1975 with Toys in the Attic. Suddenly, Aerosmith wasn't just a local act, they were a phenomenon. Sweet Emotion became their first top 40 hit. Walk This Way, with its swaggering riff and Tyler's fast-talking delivery, sealed the deal. The band was officially in the big leagues. They followed with Rocks in 1976, which critics and fans still call one of the greatest hard rock records ever made. Tracks, like Back in the Saddle and Last Child, proved Aerosmith could match, and even outdo, the British giants of the era. On stage, they were unstoppable. Tyler strutted, screamed, and draped scarves across his microphone stand. Perry stood stoic, blasting out riffs like a machine. Together, they looked like a dangerous marriage between chaos and precision. But behind the scenes, the band was already spiraling. The money, the fame, the endless touring, everything came with a price. Cocaine and heroin flooded their world. The Toxic Twins, as Tyler and Perry were soon nicknamed, weren't just rock stars. They were walking disasters. Still, in the late 70s, fans didn't care. The chaos was part of the myth, and Aerosmith kept feeding it. By the late 1970s, Aerosmith was on top of the world and falling apart at the same time. The band's addictions weren't just rumors. They were everywhere. Tyler and Perry were barely functional. Recording sessions dragged on endlessly, and tours became unpredictable roller coasters of brilliance and disaster. In 1979, things snapped. During the recording of Night in the Ruts, Perry walked out after a backstage fight, literally leaving the band mid-tour. Brad Whitford followed soon after. The albums that followed, like Rock in a Hard Place, kept the Aerosmith name alive, but without the original chemistry, they lacked the magic. By the early 80s, Aerosmith was in freefall. Tyler was physically wrecked. Stories circulated of shows where he could barely stand, slurring through lyrics, or even collapsing mid-performance. Their reputation as America's Rolling Stones had crumbled into whispers of washed-up junkies. For most bands, that would have been the end. But fate had one more twist waiting. In 1986, an unlikely duo knocked on Aerosmith's broken-down door. Run DMC. The hip-hop pioneers wanted to remake Walk This Way. At first, Aerosmith resisted. Rock and rap weren't supposed to mix. But when they stepped into the studio, something magical happened. The track wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural earthquake. Suddenly, Aerosmith was cool again. They weren't relics. They were relevant. The success reignited something. Tyler and Perry reunited, and with rehab programs behind them, the Toxic Twins began trying to clean up, for real this time. In 1987, they released Permanent Vacation. Songs like Dude, Looks Like a Lady, and Angel put them back on the charts. By 1989, Pump pushed them even higher. Love in an Elevator and Janie's Got a Gun proved Aerosmith wasn't just surviving, they were thriving. The band that nearly died in the gutter was now headlining stadiums again. The 1990s were Aerosmith's redemption era. Their 1993 album, Get a Grip, was massive, selling over 20 million copies worldwide. Tracks like Cryin', Amazing, and Crazy dominated MTV, fueled by iconic music videos starring Alicia Silverstone and Liv Tyler, Steven's own daughter. Suddenly, Aerosmith wasn't just a classic rock band. They were a pop culture machine. Their songs played everywhere: radios, commercials, movies. Then came 1998's I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. Written for the blockbuster film Armageddon, the song became Aerosmith's first #1 single on the Billboard Hot 100. Even people who didn't care about rock suddenly knew the band. And while fame had nearly destroyed them once, this time they handled it differently. They toured, they recorded, they gave interviews, but they also worked on staying clean. Behind the chaos, Aerosmith started channeling their fame into good. They became involved in charity work, supporting causes like Music for Relief, raising money for disaster victims, and using their platform to help addiction recovery organizations. The wildest band in America had matured without losing their edge. The 2000s and 2010 weren't without challenges. Steven Tyler's health issues, including vocal cord surgeries and a much-publicized fall from a stage, reminded fans that even legends have limits. Perry pursued solo projects. Rumors of breakups swirled constantly. But somehow, Aerosmith always circled back. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2001. They kept selling out shows, playing residencies in Las Vegas, and proving that even 5 decades in, they could still bring fire to the stage. Of course, there were personal struggles. Tyler's battles with painkillers, Perry's near-death health scares, and the reality of aging in rock and roll. But unlike the reckless 1970s, Aerosmith confronted these struggles with a new kind of honesty. And through it all, their fans never left. From Dream On to Don't Want to Miss a Thing, Aerosmith's music had become the soundtrack for generations. From Boston basements to global stadiums, Aerosmith proved that legends aren't born, they're forged. They stared down self-destruction, clawed back from the edge, and redefined what it means to last in rock and roll. Their story isn't just about the hits. It's about resilience, survival, and the will to keep going when the world counts you out. And maybe that's why they'll always be remembered as more than just a band. They're a symbol of never letting the fire die. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Aerosmith's unbelievable journey, make sure to hit like, drop a comment on your favorite Aerosmith moment, and subscribe so you never miss the next legendary story. Because the history of rock is far from over.